33,000 vote differential were noted between the votes cast for the president and those for governor, senator, women rep. I tried this morning to explain that some answers arose from stray ballots. Would you tell us how many constitute stray ballots? And can you also share with us how those stray ballots are in terms of counties? Related to that, did you, in your analysis, did you have any instances where voters walked into the polling station, voted for the president, and no other candidate or no other category of candidates, what in this court we call the Mwilu question, in reference to my lady, the vice president, I think arising from the 2017 question that I think my lady and my lord, Mr. Justice Smoking issued with 5-6 ballot papers, but you don't utilize all of them. Senior Counsel Kamau Karori, the appointment of the chairperson of the IEBC was gazetted by the chairman himself. I would like to know whether he was gazetted as an agent of the commission or he was gazetted as national returning officer in his capacity as the chairman of the commission, and whether, if it was as an agent of the commission, whether there were any resolutions preceding this appointment. I'm back to Mr. Mahat with the question of voter turnout. According to your presentation on PowerPoint this afternoon, you said there were 45,994 voters who were identified through Kim's kit, and this is out of 46,229. Sorry, that Kim's kit were used in 45,994 polling stations out of 46,229. That gives us 235 polling stations, which I assume I did not use Kim's kit. Therefore, assuming that the manual system was employed to identify them, are you able to say numbers from these 235 polling stations? I saw some figures like 860 or 86,000, 114,000. So if you can just clarify that for us. And again to Mr. Mahat, because he dealt with figures. Mr. Umtata yesterday presented also a PowerPoint to demonstrate that 1.6 million votes were cast or were streaming in many hours after the closure of voting. If you can also respond to that question. Mr. Gumbo, both Mr. George Oraro, Senior Counsel, in their submissions talked about how Kenyans were following the streaming of results live. And then something happened and that stopped. Can you explain to us what may have happened for this to have stopped. My lady, those are all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Council. Again, your submissions were most helpful. We thank you. Professor Muigai, you said that the whole dispute revolves around numbers. And you were before us in 2016. The Elections Act was prominent at the time. Morgan versus Simpson was prominent. You were Attorney General at the time. A number of things happened around Section 83 post our judgment. My question is, looking at the qualitative, the quantitative test, and Professor Kindiki raised the question too around Section 83. I had it before he raised it. Could you speak to it? And what is the approach you should take in this case? Number two, to your team, and in your question, I'm raising it deliberately because I have reason to. I know that the events of 15th August are in our minds, but remember that there was an extra day by Bukati could have declared way till that day. No, will not extra day to do what. Mr. Oraro, I you're coming from. I understand where your clients are coming from. Mr. is coming from. We are now in a sport where public office is becoming exceedingly dangerous. Falsehoods are being peddled, not just to those on this side, but more even on this side and those outside. So I understand the need for you to say, my clients would like to clear their names. Come back to the pain of aside. What do you want this court to do? Information you've given us. So we add your side. What do you take the context of this judgment in the what do you do with this? And while you're at it, you also mentioned Section 83. Perhaps you also say something. Regulation 873. General, and for the fact appearing amicus, but as a respondent, could you say something about Regulation 873? The question I posed to Tenoroji, it would be helpful for us if we could hear you on that question. Mr. Mahat, I may have missed this, but I still don't clear my this question I posed to Mr. Murgo well. At what point exactly does it convert to PDF? Forget the CSV story. I guess Mr. Murgo dropped that. But I just want to understand for myself. At what point you've taken the image, you've asked all the questions, very good questions you've asked, the system has asked you the question. At what point does it convert to PDF? I thank you all very much. Thank you, Judge President.
Thank you, Judge President. My questions will go to Professor Muigai. As we've been asked by a number of parties that they've asked us to settle the law around Article 138.3 and 10. In your submissions, you suggested that the term commission can be used in multiple senses. How do we, as a former Attorney General, Perhaps you can point out to us whether it is in regulations, it is in the law, but how do we know which sense is applied when? My second question goes to the history of independent commissions, and Professor Muigai, you sat on the CKRC together with my colleague, Justice Lenaula, and you do know that the drafters of the Constitution introduced independent commissions and independent offices to deal with issues of authoritarianism, accountability, transparency, and to do away with the issue of one person having power. But from the narrative that we're hearing here in the court, there appears to be an all-powerful chair who, so what is the check for this all-powerful chair if the commissioners have nothing to do with his role? What would happen if the chair was to announce the wrong results completely? Or if he was mentally incapacitated or sick, or worst case scenario, dead? Who then would announce the results? What is the role of the other commissioners? I think this is bothering me, especially because it seems to me that your client and the IEBC suggest that the chairperson works with the CEO, and I feel a bit concerned. The CEO is not vetted by Parliament. He is appointed, but he seems to wield immense powers over and above the other commissioners. I cannot imagine that that could have been the intention of the drafters of the Constitution. So what role do these commissioners actually do? Because it hasn't come clearly. Or, for example, if one commissioner says he's in charge of ICT, what does that mean? Does it mean he's in charge of ICT until the presidential election, then he's not? What does it mean? What is the role of these commissioners? And I'm asking this question more towards trying to understand the leadership and the management in the commission as opposed to the management of the presidential election. Because I think they're two separate issues, and I'm trying to figure out whether this is a Chebukati problem, is it a leadership problem, is it a commissioner's problem? What's this problem we're seeing? I'm trying to understand that, and I'd like to hear that from you. Thank you. One more question, sorry. When the results come for other elections, so you have returned for senator, for governor, for MCA, and they are all announced or declared locally at the polling station, constituency, county. How is that information transmitted to the public? And when that information is transmitted to the public through a gazette notice, are the commissioners involved? Or is it the CEO only? Or is it the chairperson only? Who is involved in the declaration or the transmission of declaration publicly of those results? Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Justice. My first question, I think, could be addressed by Mr. Karori. In the morning, you did really argue quite strongly verification, tallying, and declaration of the result, the presidential election result. That really, if you look at the law in your interpretation of the Article 138 and the jurisprudence that you say emanates from this court, you seem to be arguing that that is strictly within the purview of the chair's mandate, and that really these other commissioners, let's say the remaining, the 6 commissioners, really ought not to be around that, because that's a role preserved for the chair. But then you said, according to the statute that establishes this commission, the enabling statute, the roles and functions of the commission, qua commission, are stated. One of them is oversight. What is oversight? If, in fact, the commissioners, I would have thought that one of the most important oversight roles in the commissioner's life would be when they are overseeing the verification and tallying of the presidential election result at the center before the same is then declared on behalf and for and but for the people of Kenya by the chair. So what is oversight? I ask this because we were informed yesterday, and I think you were here, that instead of perhaps playing this role, some of them were allocated welfare scenarios, protocol, and media. But what is oversight? What would they be oversighting over? That's the question. In other words, at what point in this corporate entity scenario does the chair then disengage from the other commissioners? Be they 2 or be they 5 or 6? When do you say this is chair qua chair and this is chair as part of the... Because we need to understand that. We've been asked to provide clarity. Then go to Mahat. Mahat, there is this story about this Venezuelan. And one of the issues is whether the technology system employed or deployed was penetrated. And you did tell us, again, quite robustly, that there was no such penetration or infiltration or intrusion, or whichever. But you did also concede that this Venezuelan, whatever his name is, had access to the server. But your answer was that the contract between the IEBC and Smartmatic was to supply and maintenance. So if I understood you correctly, is Venezuela part of the maintenance? What is this maintenance? What does it entail? What was he doing there? Say he was released and locked out just before the election. So what was he maintaining in that system? Maybe you just want to tell us what maintenance entails as part of that contract agreement. Then back to the question of percentages, again, in terms of the turnout. I think I asked this question, I asked Mr. Orengo, but now that you may not have another, you may also want to address it. In the arguments that have been presented before us, Mr. Chebukati, the chair, first mentioned a 65.4% turnout. And then he did indicate that that was bound to change as results kept streaming in, especially if you took into consideration the number of those who had voted manually and the numbers that had yet to come in from the elders. Now, it is the petitioner's argument that if there was to be any change at all, then that percentage would have to increase rather than decrease. So I don't know. And how relevant, again, is this turnout to the determination of whether a candidate gathered 50% plus 1 vote? And then, you see, we have been asked by Mr. Ngatia, who do you believe among these two protagonists? I believe this question has been put to us, and believe you me, we will have to deal with it. Who do we believe? Now, the question of the National Security Advisory Council. This, I think, Mr. Oraro, this could be of interest to you. On the one hand, you are telling us that this personnel visited the premises at the Bomas to express their concern, because, of course, being an advisory council, they must have arrived at a conclusion that unless the results were released, then there was bound to be chaos. But on the other hand, the chair, in his affidavit, tells the court that the only reason the AG, or I mean not the AG, but the individuals, distinguished people for whom we have a lot of respect, paid that visit, was to tell the chair to somehow re-engineer the results in favor of one of the candidates. Now, this is not a question to you, but a question to Mr. Chepkati's counsel. Professor, you may want to, or even Mr. Karori, are we to assume that by the time Mr. Kinyo placed this call, if the intention was to influence the declaration of the results, re-engineer, are we to assume that by the time that call was placed, and by the time these gentlemen paid this visit, they already knew the results? Because there's no way they would have been on that mission if they had not known the results. So are we to assume that in fact, if this be their mission, assume that they already knew the results? Okay. Then finally, Mr. Kilokumi, you know, you cited King Solomon. And this court treats Holy Scriptures very seriously. You came up with, you say there is victory. Because in King Solomon's story, the protagonists were distinguished mothers. But here, you called them two gentlemen. But I also remember that one of the mothers who turned out, or the mother claimants, who according to Solomonic wisdom could not have been the mother, is the one who was saying, cut the baby. But the other one, I remember, said, no, let her take the baby. Because what she was interested in is to preserve the baby. Would you be willing to advise? I rest my case.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable CJ and President of the Court. I just have one inquiry, one question for the respondents, and it may go to, actually it may be answered by either the counsel, Senior Counsel Gidu Muigai and his team for the first and second respondents, or it could also be taken up at the same time by counsel for the respondent. That is the team of the team of Senior Counsel Fred Gatia. It's my understanding that one of the submissions and cases in response by the first and second respondents, on the one hand, and the ninth respondent, that is the President-elect, are placing the blame on the events of the 9th at the Tallying Center, Bomas of Kenya. That the two groups of parties are placing the blame on the first and second petitioners' agents, and sympathizers and supporters during the tallying and verification. Of course, we have images. Some of us, many of us were not there. We have images which we saw on TV. We cannot say anything about what exactly happened, but we just know there was commotion. and people are having throwing chairs and even perhaps attempt to harm each other. But we cannot say anything about it ourselves as a bench. Neither were those matters before us in these proceedings. No. We have seen the fits, seen the submissions, but no actually determination or delving into any evidence. So, and yet there is a request, a suggestion that we should attribute and apportion blame among the, we should place the blame on some parties, particularly the petitioners, because of their agents, supporters, and therefore actually you expect, particularly I can see the submissions of the 9th respondent, and even I saw the affidavit of Professor Kuuria, who actually says he expects action to be taken to investigate those criminal election offenses. So I just to that would you expect, having had such elaborate submissions and affidavits, would you still expect us to make a determination, portion blame, attribute blame, yet really the matter is not before us? Neither are we witnesses, neither were we had merit before us. The question I would like you to think about and reflect, and when you come back, you will tell us whether you expect any release from us on that aspect. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge President. My questions will be sought from the team led by Professor Muigai, Senior Counsel. The first clarification I seek is as follows. As regards the requirements of Article 140, and just remaining within Article 140, and even considering that the 4 new commissioners only arrived in, was it September last year? And whatever it is they've been on a day basis, please clarify in my mind, because it's a major issue here, what the constitutional role of the 6 commissioners is under Article 140. And once you tell us what it is, just position their role against that of the staff of the Secretariat and of the chair. To the same team, and that is as per Article 138, 3C. To the same team, of course, numbers are critical. They are, for me, they are. Because that is a mandate of 138, 4A and B. Threshold, the 50% plus 1. And numbers are important for as long as they are not negated by any other process. Anything else? And if Article 138, 4, A and B are not enough, deriving from them, these instead, they are important. We comment on whether or not the first one, the walking away of the 4 commissioners to go and hold, was it an IEBC meeting at Serena? Or was the IEBC meeting at Bomas? But please comment on the walking away of the 4 commissioners almost at the same time as the chair was about to declare the results. And in fact, I recall, because I was glued on TV myself, first words were that as concerns this election. But the results that the chairman is about to release are his results. So please comment for my benefit that working out and how was it timed? You've got to know, because these are your clients, that they would be walking out of Bomas to Serena to allow all media houses, in fact, except for the violence that occurred at Bomas, the split screens of media houses would have been showing each one of them addressing us, the Kenyan voter, at the same time. In fact, at one moment there, I thought the team at Serena would give us their numbers, and the team at Bomas was going to give us their own numbers. So my concern is, does their walking out mean anything under Article 140? What is it? If it doesn't, why not? Still on numbers, still on us, and answering all of us, yours and our issue number 4 and 5, we were told, and I need clarity on this one because it cuts across 2 main issues, that the turnout, the voter turnout, affected by the postponed election. Now, this is my concern. On the 9th, we were 6 officers. And we actually voted for 6 officers, including in the places where elections were postponed. And we were told that turnout was affected by the postponement. And since you are the central player in this thing, you could pass this to Mahat or anybody else in your team. Did the postponement affect only the vote of the president? And since we are in the habit of taking judicial notice, and since I am in a position